Welcome to the Mixed Race Audio Portrait Series. This series is a culmination of 4 months of interviewing and collecting stories from 4 extraordinary Washingtonians. I first came up with the idea to do this series when I was talking to Michelle Phipps Evans, and she told me about celebrating Chinese New Year with her Chinese grandfather in Trinidad. I was fascinated with this idea of living in between cultures, and I wanted to hear more. I soon learned that there are many people in the United States like Michelle. Over 9 million people identified as mixed race in the 2010 U.S. Census, and that number is only growing. But I also learned that while mixed race people are highly visible, their stories are not often told. Their faces are often used for racially ambiguous advertising or for covers of magazines that say, "Is this what the next America will look like?" Most people assume that those who identify as mixed race live in a rosy world called a post-racial society. In honor of finally listening to their stories, we put together this audio portrait series with an emphasis on sound, so that we can concentrate on their words rather than how they look. In a world where we are bombarded with visual stimuli from television and the internet, tonight we will tap into our most primal sense, our sense of sound. Sound allows us to slow down and lets our imagination run wild. Before we were even born, we could hear the world around us. So sit back, close your eyes, and listen.
Alrighty, so we gotta make some wontons, girls.
Water.
Woo!
Oh, I'm nervous. I know what that part is.
Yes, you could make it.
I know how to do this.
Korea, too much
This is
excitement.
easy.
Yeah, you know how to make wontons, right?
Yeah.
I'm Michelle Phipps Evans, and I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, and I live here in Washington, D.C. I had learned to make wontons from my mom when I was a teenager. She taught me how to cut the chicken, how to do the Chinese style chicken, to chop the meat, to put the seasonings in it, and all the other seasonings. And the most important thing is she taught me how to fold it. My grandfather came from China several years ago, and my mom is half Chinese, and so that makes me a quarter Chinese. I remember going by my grandfather for New Year's when I was a younger kid. He would come out, "Happy New Year, Happy New Year." $20 in the red envelope. All of us got it. $20 in the red envelope. I'm like, dang, I gotta go back often. My grandfather's name is Wilfred Jean, and he came to Trinidad when he was a very young man. He came because his brother had a supermarket, and he invited his younger brothers, 2 brothers, to come and work with him at the supermarket in the island of Trinidad and Tobago. So he ran the supermarket with his brothers, and my grandmother was one of the cashiers, and she was about 18, 17 or 18. She was a young girl, and he was a young man too. And I think that, they had a relationship or a friendship, however you want to call it. And my mother was the result. In 1945, March 22nd, 1945. And then later on, they had another child, my Uncle Jap, he was probably born in 1946. In Trinidad, I would be considered a mixed race Trinidadian, whatever went along with that and what that meant. And then to come to America, and I have been relegated to a Black American, and which is fine, which is good. I have no problems with that, of course. But it also hides the other side of me. I took some wontons to the office for Christmas for a potluck. They went off. I mean, literally. And so they started asking, where do you learn to make this? What's going on? How are you getting this? Da, da, da. Why it tastes so authentic? Da, da, da. It was weird. And then all of a sudden it clicked to them. Oh, Michelle, you got something else, right? I was like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because this is America, they stick you all into this one box, into the black box or the white box or the Asian box or the whichever box, and then you're supposed to fit and do the dance within that little box, and that's where you're supposed to stay. When I had finished grad school at Columbia, and I was one of the professors who was supposed to be advising me on job placements and things like that, she told me that why don't you go and try Black entertainment television? I felt very insulted. Not, pretty insulted because she wanted to put me into the black box. And, it was like I wanted more than just being a Black journalist. In my mind, I wanted CNN. I always wanted to do CNN. I wanted to do that kind of serious journalism. Talea is my daughter, my older daughter, and her name is Talea Lanfong Chase Evans. She's named after my mother. Mommy's Chinese name is Lamfong. So I know for sure Lamfong means sunflower. That's what they had told me. I have 3 children. I think they do like having the Chinese side as well. I had Talea telling people, you have a little Chinese. Yeah, plus they see their grandmother, and she looks very much, part Asian, so they could see that. One of the things I'll do is I'll definitely take them to anything, well, like the Chinese New Year events. I'll try to take them to those things because, they're hearing the singing from their daddy that they're Black Americans, they're African Americans. But they're hearing this other story from their mom that, oh, we might be other. We might have other things going on. If we're doing things around the house, I would say, oh yeah, my mom would have done things this way, and her father was, as he was Chinese, he would do things this way. I have no problem with classifying myself as a Black person with Chinese. I got Chinese going on inside of me. And unlike most other Trinidadians, I have other racial backgrounds. So my father has Indian, so I have some of that Indian background, as well as my mother's great grandfather was white. So we have white, we have Indian, I have Chinese, we have African. It's just so unfortunate that people want to look at you as one. I just have a problem with being classified by, when other people want to classify you. I think humankind should be able to self-classify. People should be able to define who they are from within.
I remember I broke up with someone and like she was super upset and I was super upset. I spent all my like willpower trying to like not call her back or not try and take it back because it wasn't a great relationship. And like the next day, I was like, I think I just gotten paid or something along those lines. And I was just walking. I was kind of in one of those dazes where I was just kind of, I wasn't paying attention to anything. And I just like look up and I was on Route 1 at UMD and I look up and it's Big Planet Comics. And I was like, all right, well, I might feel better if I just go in and just like for a second read something. And then like 2.5 hours later, I had spent $270 on comic books. My name is Leland Rafiq Queen, and I grew up in Tacoma Park, Maryland. My mother is from Bangladesh. My dad's African American, and recently discovered that he's also part of the Native American tribe of Maryland, the Piscataway Band. I'm obsessed with comic books. Love comic books. I have about a good $10,000 worth of comics. Sometimes if I go with my friends, I have to literally turn to the friend that I trust the most or I've been around the most, and I just go, here's my wallet, don't let me buy anything. And then I'll pickpocket them so I can get my wallet back and like buy stuff. So when I was like, it was like when I was 5 or 6. My dad, well, my cousin originally was is still a huge Batman fan. He collects comic books, not as much anymore because he's a real adult. But we went on a trip with him to the comic book store, and I'd never been to a comic book store before that I could really remember. And there were just toys everywhere and comics. And I didn't really have a concept of how much I really would get into comics, but everything was bright and colorful, and I really liked it. So that was the first time I ever went to the comic book store. And later on, I just asked my dad if we could go back. So on a whim, like we were going, I think he was picking up a birthday present for someone, picking up like a toy, and I was just like running around the store, and I found this one comic, and I was like, I really want this. That was like the first one I ever got. Have you ever watched a little kid walk by something, like just one particular item or a section of items, like a lot, and every so often look at something intently and then put it down and then like walk away, but then like come back and look at it again? I think I was doing one of those numbers when my grandmother was like, I think he likes that. And then later on she talked to the comic book store guy and was like, what is that? And he's like, oh, it's Sandman, it's really weird. And she's like, I guess I'll get this. And I was like, ah, yes. Neil Gaiman's kind of world building and the way that everything is kind of weird. Like, there's wonder and fantasy in everything. It made me feel a little more okay to be kind of strange. Oh, I was so insecure about so many things. I mean, I broke 6 foot when I was in 7th or 8th grade. Like, I've always been really big. I was a bit insecure about my racial identity as well. You know, I kind of found more refuge in a nerdy culture. So in the culture of comic books, or in the culture of all of that, and tabletop role-playing games and all of that, I found more solace there, because I guess people are too socially awkward to ask. So, and I'm not saying that it's perfect culture, because issues about race and identity come up all the time in kind of nerddom, and I've heard, oh, that's a white thing, and I'm like, no, it's not. You can, again, I love stories. You don't have to be white to like a story. It must have been like 6 months after 9/11. And there's this like debate that came up in class, and people were talking about, just that time people were just angry. Somebody made a crack about Muslims, and my mother's Muslim, and I was like, well, that's not okay. And we had this discussion, and eventually it came up, well, somebody was like, how can you be more than one, if that makes sense? So you can't be, it was talking about specifically religion, and it was, people were confused about like, what religion are you? You can't be more than one religion. You can't do that. And then it kind of went into, well, outside of religion, you can't be really more than one. Like, you are a thing, like, there's a specific label that we need to give you, or else our minds will be confused. They were joking around, and I told, oh, well, I'm more than one. I'm half black, I'm half South Asian, and I do this and that. And they said, oh, well, then you're really nothing. As a person, as a human being, I'm made up of multiple parts. I'm, South Asian, African American, part Piscataway. I almost, for a while there, identified, so like, oh, how do you identify? I'm just nerdy. And people were just like, I don't understand, what happened?
I have a friend who's one of my closest friends here in this area, and she grew up in Saipan. And she's like, you're the epitome of a beautiful girl where I grew up. You're shorter, you have dark hair, you have dark eyes, you have that dark skin. You have those features. She was like, but they're like a little different, like you're a little bit mixed. She's like, you would be like the epitome of like beautiful. And she goes, and I was like that tall white girl that I was taller than all the other guys. Nobody wanted to go on dates with me. And I was like, oh my God, we lived the same life, but like swapped. Like, I was like, if I only replaced you, like Parent Trap, and she like replaced me and we swapped lives for like a week, we would have been in heaven. My name is Tara Trinity Villanueva. I'm the lead singer-songwriter of the Tara Trinity Project. I am Puerto Rican, Hawaiian, Filipina. So my mother is from El Viejo San Juan, Puerto Rico, and she's 100%. Her parents were Spaniard and also had Taino blood. And then my father, he was born in Honolulu, Oahu in Hawaii, and his mother is Native Hawaiian, and his father is Filipino. I'm part of each of their second marriages. I have two older sisters, I guess technically are my half-sisters, but I've never seen it that way, as my father raised both of them as well. And I'm 11 and 14 years younger than them. So they're only 3 years apart. Now my mother and my two sisters, they're They're all 100% Puerto Rican. Growing up, people kind of stuck to their race, and my parents, of course, had to be like the trendsetters and be like this mixed, we were this mixed hodgepodge family. Since I was raised mostly on my Puerto Rican side, they weren't quite sure of my culture, and I had a lot of questions unanswered. And my father worked nights, so the one person that I did look like, and I was similar to, and I did act similar to, wasn't usually there. I wasn't sad growing up. I was always really happy, but I always had this feeling like I just didn't fit in. And I think my family kind of felt sorry for me in this weird way, because my other two sisters didn't have that issue. You know, they already felt left out a little bit because they were like the only two Latinas in their high school. But then when it came to me, it was like even trickier. Then they were like, oh my God, sorry, you know? And then I didn't look like anybody in the family. And I remember like one day, like somebody in my family, my extended family, saying, you don't even look like you're part of this family. You look so different from everybody else. And I remember like going to my room and like crying. I was like 16 years old. And my aunt was like, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. And I was like, it's not you, it's just everything. You know, it was like the cherry on top, like the icing on top of the cake. You know, when you can just sit down and talk to somebody and they know things about you that nobody else knows, and they've been through things with you. That closeness I haven't been able to find so often here with people having that same bond. One time this guy said, you know I have a girlfriend, but I actually am more attracted to you than her. Like, you know, I'm like super attracted to like J-Lo. And I'm like, what? Like, who says that? And then there's like another guy in high school who said, I would love to date you, but I could never bring you home. What I love though is when somebody, the best is when, and this usually happens if I'm out on the weekend and people are intoxicated. The conversations, it's not like they know how to hit on me in a proper way. It's always, hey, Filipina? And his face like I should be impressed. You got 1 out of 3. And then they're like, oh, how many guesses do I get? And I'm like, dude, I don't know, you know, like, or like, I remember one night counting how many times I got that pickup line. It was probably like 8 times. Like another guy came up to me and it was like the same night. He was like, Vietnamese. I'm right. And I'm like, no. He's like, oh, Cambodian? No. Mongolian? No. Indonesian? No. Japanese? And black? No, way off. I'm just like, how are you trying to pick me up right now?
Can you tell me a little bit more about your music?
Wow, music. Music saved my life. And when I stopped doing music after college, I was very, very depressed. Because it was like losing my arm. I write all about my business. I put it out there, and there's no sugarcoating. Every line has a meaning, but everything is really all about my experiences, and they're really personal. And so when I perform, when people are listening to the music, what I want them to hear, I want them to feel what I felt. My eyes are dark, with hands so tied. The bed's so warm I can't get up to face the world. I'm laying in a pile of lies. The room is shut, just like my cries. I've sobbed for so long now, my cheeks are burned, my throat can't even force a laugh to hide. And I still miss you, 'cause I had always loved you more. There is no way to damper my heart, only time I can't see you, my eyes are smart. And I still miss you, 'cause I had always loved you more. And all I have, my tears and blurry sight, sleeping in the one last shirt you left that night.
There weren't that many Amerasians when I grew up that I ever met. The first Amerasian I met was Isamu Noguchi, who was Martha Graham's set designer, and I had dinner with some artists along that were my parents' friends, and they brought me along when I was a little kid, and there was this man sitting there, and I looked at his face and I thought, oh, his face looks like my face a little bit. Like I suddenly was really thinking, like, what is he, you know? My name's Dana Tasuan Burgess, and I'm a choreographer. My mom and my dad met in college at Cranbrook Arts Academy. My father's side is English, Scotch, Irish, German. I guess our oldest ancestors on that side are related to Henry VIII's #1 butler, the Earl of Southwell. On my mom's side, it's Korean. So my mom's family came over in 1903, so they're considered some of the first families to America. Being in New Mexico and growing up in a Latino neighborhood, going to bilingual schools, but then being Korean and American, it was like a lot of hats to wear. So as soon as I left the house, which would feel very Asian and very American, then I'd go directly kind of into a whole Latino community for the rest of the day, and then get home and then switch gears and then go to martial arts classes, which got even more Asian. So it was like a constantly moving from, I think, culture to culture. When I was in school, like, the kids used to call me Chino, which means like Chinese, but I'd always say, like, I'm not Chino, like, what are you talking about? Like, I'd get so angry, but it's actually just a nickname. I think that being like mixed race is always being somewhere in the middle of everything and being in the midst of nowhere. And so, you know, and I believe that's why I do what I do, or the artistic aesthetic that I have, which is constantly searching for an understanding of identity and place. I realized one day that a lot of the dancers are like Korean and American like myself, or they're Asian American, and then a large part of the dancers are Latino from different parts of Latin and South America. And I realized, oh, that's exactly how I grew up, that somehow I've redistilled this culture within a dance studio. One of my works is called Becoming American, and it's specifically about a Korean adoptee, about her journey of literally flying to America, a sense of displacement, trying to learn English, trying to feel an understanding of who her parents were and what a parent meant. Sometimes it's always this constant struggle of trying to figure out my own identity and a sense of place is what's making this choreography come out over and over again.
Stranger,
I think my cultural background in terms of having been a martial artist, and then I moved into modern dance, and my parents are visual artists, somehow that all kind of comes together where I look at the stage as a canvas and I see the dancers as almost like calligraphy strokes.
lying beside me, you pretend everything's okay, but the distance in your eyes.
At the end of this year, the Korean embassy is going to install an exhibit about my dance company and my creative process, and mention what my lineage is and relationship to Korea. And that for me is really exciting, because being half Korean and then being acknowledged by the Korean government is a really special thing. I think that over the 23 years I've had the company, people understand that the choreographic stories that I create are universal. We all have ghosts in a sense. We all have memories that haunt us, that we don't quite understand how we ended up in a certain time or place or space.
Oh, stranger, lying beside me, you pretend everything.
I love mystery, and I love not spelling everything out in a dance. When you're living in a world with more mystery than not, it pushes us to be creative and to make new discoveries.